the New History on the Edge. I am very happy to introduce our lecturer today, who is Gabriela Pošteková, a PhD student at the Comenius University in Bratislava. And since the 8th of March is approaching, we are starting with a topic which is close to what we celebrate on the 8th of March, so women and feminism. Because Gabriela is researching the history of Catholic women's movements with a focus on Catholic women in Czechoslovakia in the interwar period. And the title of her lecture today is Balancing Faith and Modernity, the Catholic Women's Unity in Interwar Slovakia. So the stage is yours.
Okay, so thank you for the kind introduction. I am honored to be here as a speaker today, and I appreciate everyone for taking time to attend. And so let's get started. So in 1918, women in Czechoslovakia gained right to vote, which immediately changed politics because political parties realized that women made half of the electorate. And also they changed the political campaign accordingly. And many politics movements and also women's movements started to teach women about politics and how to be responsible citizens. And they also started to publish magazines about politics for women. And one of the party who also realized this was Slovak People's Party, or later renamed as Hlinka's Slovak People's Party. Before the creation of Czechoslovakia, they did not support the women's suffrage, but after they gained the right to vote, they also realized potential of female voters. And one of its members, a priest called Eugen Filkon, brought together religious women from Trnava, which is a small city, or not so small city near Bratislava, together and inspired them to establish some kind of women organization. So they established Catholic Women Unity, which was an organization made up exclusively of women. And they also established many branches all across Slovakia. And they grew really fast because in the first year, this organization had 1,500 members. But by 1930, they had 66,000 members. Or in 1948, they reached its peak membership of about 300,000 of women. And the goal of this organization was just to keep Catholic women in Catholic Church, because many women's movements were created after the war, and also just to support the goals of the Catholic Church and just to spread Catholic values in their families. And so this organization had their meetings once a month in every branch, and they also organized various conferences or charity events, pilgrimages. They also had their own publishing company, and they also published religious literature and also their own magazines. Their main magazine was called Katolická jednota, or Catholic Unity, but beside it, they also published, for example, listy rodičom, or letters to parents, yearly calendars. All from 1937, they started to publish their new magazine called Nová žena, or the New Women. And also the all leadership position in this organization, like presidents, vice president, treasurer, were only for women. And the only exception was its spiritual leader, as I said, Eugen Filkon. He was the only male in this organization. So, as I said, their main magazine was the Catholic Unity magazine. It was published once a month, and it was supposed to be an educational magazine. So they wrote about topics that were related to Catholic women. So we can find a lot of articles about motherhood. I have some examples of titles here. So they wrote, about motherhood, about education, for example, how to raise children, how to raise boys and girls, or how to be ideal Christian woman. Or they wrote, for example, about fashion, modest fashion. And they also had the regular columns like Thoughts from Experience or A Woman to Woman, when the editors shared their own experiences and stories as Catholic women in Slovak society. And they also wrote a lot about religion and politics. I have more examples here. For example, Bolsheviks and Christianity, Was Jesus a Social Democrat, Effects of Bolshevik Poison, or they wrote about separation of church and state. So they really wanted to make it like an educational magazine for Catholic women because, as I said, after the war, there were created many more magazines like this to teach women about politics. And this was also the case, but the editors wanted to make it like from the Christian point of view, because many women's movements started to preach some kind of secure feminist ideas, and from that point of view, these magazines, and so they wanted to be rooted in Christian teachings. And yeah, so all of the authors or whole editorial board was also made up exclusively of women, but they were also had like external authors, mostly Catholic priests and or bishops. And they wanted to give a Catholic women like some kind of ideological support and shape their thinking and guide them in all aspects of life. And they really believed that women should be teachers in their family, and that women have a strong influence in her family and through that in the society. And they believe that a woman shouldn't be like publicly active because she needs to be just active in her family, and she should be like a responsible mother. We can, for example, see it here on this example when they wrote, "A woman and mother can always preach correct in the family, and her speech will always have a result. Today, the priest is not listened to. Our press is thrown around. Our schools are avoided, but everyone finds the family heart. Everyone's come to their mother." So they really believe that women are responsible for society before God, but through their influence in the society. Like when they will be influencing their husbands and their sons, this way they would be influencing whole society. So they don't need to have like a public role. So this is why they were different from the other women's association in Slovakia at the time. And also, it was in the 1920s when there were many people who were saying that Catholic women couldn't make their own opinions and they were just listening to priests and they did everything Catholic priests tell them to do. But the editors of these magazines really wanted to prove them wrong. And they started to say that that's the reason why they established their own magazines, to be like an evidence that they can think of themselves, that they can also teach women about religions, politics, and they can make their own opinions. For example, I was in those regular columns like Thoughts for Experience or Woman to Woman. So it was like there were many prejudices at the times toward Catholic women. And I also read a lot of newspaper from the time from the various political parties who mainly before elections wrote articles about that Catholic women couldn't make their opinions and they are just listening to priests and that's it. And also historian John Walcott wrote about it that this stereotype was based on the idea that masculinity was linked to civil rights, independent thinking and science, which were associated with secularism. And also saying that they couldn't make their opinions and they were just listening to priests, just oversimplified the issues and ignored the deeper social and political thinking of these women. And John Walcott also points out that religious men's opinions and voting choices were not seen as being influenced in the same way as those of women. So when I talk about Christian feminism, or more specifically Catholic feminism, I want to say that the editors had mixed feelings about the use of the term Christian feminism. It was pretty common in the beginning of the 20th century because, as historian Krista Kalman said, that there were many women's movements who did not identify with the term feminism because they had like their own opinion on what feminism is or was. And this was also the case of the many Christian, or more specifically Catholic women movements, because in Europe, for example, we can find many Catholic women associations who said that they are feminists and they were like proud feminists. And you can find many associations who didn't use this term and they were even fighting against feminism because they saw it just in this secular way and they connected it with socialism or communism. And also, like historian Karen Offen wrote in her study Defining Feminism, she divided feminism into two categories, like individualistic and relational feminism. And in those relational feminism category, you also find this Christian feminism because this category of women's movement, which weren't just Christian or Catholic, But these women wanted to keep traditional gender roles, and they were just supporting better conditions for women as mothers and housewives, and they recognized their work in home equal as men's work outside home. So in the 1920s, the editors of the Catholic Unity magazines didn't use the term feminism, and they were fighting against feminism. But it had changed in 1930s because we can read a lot of time about how they use this term Christian feminism or healthy emancipation. I have one example here when they wrote, I will read it out loud, Christianity does not agree with the loud and inappropriate extremes of modern women's emancipation, particularly when they harm femininity or Christian principles. Nor does it agree with immoral excesses, which unfortunately this otherwise healthy movement often stray into. Ideal Christian feminism sees the role of the deeply grounded Christian woman alongside the man, never above him, never below him, but never against him, etc., etc. So they started to use these terms, but I would say, like many times in the way they were trying to say that they are publicly active, so their activism is considered as feminist, but they are not those feminists who want to harm femininity and Christian principles and stuff like that. So there is maybe a question like who preached this kind of femininity which harm femininity or Christian principles in Slovakia at the time? And the answer is quite easy to find because we can see it on the front page of the first issue ever published of the magazine Catholic Unity. But before I get to it, I just wanted to say that the first elections, parliamentary elections that were held in Czechoslovakia were on April 1920. And the Social Democratic Party won, and the second was Czech Slovak People's Party, which was United Czech Slovak People's Party and Slovak People's Party, which were Catholic parties. So the main enemy of the Catholic parties in parliament were Social Democratic Party. And as I said, these elections were held on April 1920, and just a few months after that, the Catholic Unity was established. And on September 1920, they published their first issue. And on the front page, there is a first article called What Do We Want? And it starts like, dark clouds of godlessness have appeared over the clear horizon of Slovakia. They threaten us with destructions. Enemies of the church have achieved much. They want to tear Slovakia away from Catholic principles and strip it of its greatest treasure. They want to destroy the family heart. They are poisoning our children. They are taking away our schools. They are reaching for our sacred temples. And then, seeing this danger, we want to gather all Catholic-minded women of Slovakia in one camp under Catholic unity who would protect and develop the Catholic nature of Slovakia. So by dark clouds of godlessness, they obviously meant Social Democratic Party or socialism. And also in this first issue, they published more articles about against socialism, and also in like other issues in the first year, or also during the 1920s, 1930s, we can find many articles against socialism, or more specifically communism, because Communist Party was established in 1921 in Czechoslovakia. So I have more examples here. For example, Christianity and communism, or communists are taking children away from their parents, or the principles of socialism are anti-Christian, or why socialism cannot be compared to Christianity. And it was because Catholic women felt really threatened by communists. It was because Social Democratic Party and also Communist Party fought for women's right as a right to abortion or divorces, they were for nationalization of church property, and this was directly against their values as Catholic women. So they wanted to write about it. And also they wrote a lot about how many times Catholic women joined communists, and how many communist women proclaimed that they are Catholics and it's okay to be Catholic and communist. But they didn't think so. That's why they wrote many articles with titles like Why Socialism Cannot Be Compared to Christianity, or The Principles of Socialism Are Anti-Christian. And I don't know the exact numbers of how many Catholic women joined the Communist Party, but at least the editors of the Catholic Unity magazine felt that way, that it's really many women who could join the Communist Party. And always, because secular feminism focus on gender equality and equal rights, it forced people who believe in traditional gender roles to defend their view of the traditional gender roles. And they often use this term like traditional gender roles are God-given and natural. And for them, it was unquestionable. But in a more secular society, you cannot use this term, it's a God-given or natural, because there were someone who say otherwise. And many people wanted something which is beneficial for them, not if it's natural or not natural. So they really felt like the communist vision of, for example, gender equality was more attractive for women. And they also gradually started to talk more about gender equality. But still, in a way, they wanted to keep traditional gender roles. So they started to say that women and men are equal in value, in dignity, they are equal before God, but they need to keep traditional gender roles because it made society balance, and men and women had unique strengths and qualities. And for example, they wrote it here, the divine idea is the basis of both creations, only the roles are different. Every effort to eliminate this difference has always been an unnatural and therefore futile attempt. And therein lies the irreplaceable role of men and women for the entire society. A woman can do what a man cannot. A man can do what a woman cannot. Their functions complement each other. So this was like their statement in a nutshell of what they thought. But they really started to say that it is equality for them. And they started to write that Christianity made men and women equal. And there were many articles about how women in other cultures and in other countries were slaves, or for example, in Islamic countries that men had multiple wives. And we can also see it here in the beginning when they quote Bible, there is neither male nor female, for we are all in Christ. Did Christ not elevate women to the status of equals with men? So they started to say that Christianity made men and women equal, so there's nothing to fight for anymore. And everything else wanted to place women above men, and this was unnatural and wrong. And they also use these formal equality in language they use. I have some examples here when they wrote about women that they are Catholic guards, or Catholic mothers, warriors of Christ's kingdom, or heroic mothers, or Catholic women in the fight, to the fight. So, of course, these words were usually linked to a man's role in the society, like men should be warriors and going to the actual war. And they started to link it also to the woman's role in the society. But of course, they didn't mean it in a literal way. They didn't want women to go to the war, obviously. But they started to say, like, women should fight moral battle. So in case of women, they meant it like more in metaphorical way. And in men's case, it was like in a more literal way. And this view on this, as I call it, harmonious inequality didn't change over time. But what had changed over time was the approach to crisis. Because, as I said in the beginning, they saw the society after the war as in a time of crisis. And the solution to not be in the crisis was to go to the pre-war society. But this has changed after 10 years, or more specifically 11 years, because they felt like after the decade, nothing has changed. And they are not very successful because they still saw crisis in the society. And they wrote here, it has been 11 years since the terrible war storm. We have already forgotten many things, and time has already healed many wounds. But some wounds seems to be only now beginning to open. Humanity cannot return to the old pre-war tracks. Humanity, it seems, has not learned anything from that cruel war. Catholic women, do not allow the poison of disruption into your sacred hearts. And when the serpent appears, nip it in the bud. This is what your church, your nation, and your Christian conscience preach to you. So they really wanted to change the direction, and it meant to be more publicly active, not just as it was in the beginning, like woman should be in her primary role as a mother, and through that role she should influence the society. They changed it like women should be also equally publicly active. And I have 2 examples here when they wrote in the first or second one, as she consciously served the well-being of the family, she also consciously served the general well-being, and she's aware that one day it will be difficult to answer to God for the way she used public rights of her given. So it was like kind of threat to women that they need to be publicly active because they will answer to God, and it won't be good for them if they won't be publicly active. And they also started to place it like on the really equality way. For example, as we can say on the second example, woman is irreplaceable necessary for family life, but she's equally necessary for the interest of Christ's kingdom everywhere in public life. This is the motto of the well-understood Christian emancipation of women in a nutshell. So you can see they again use this term Christian emancipation, for example. So this was also the change in 1930s, they started to use the term Christian feminism, and they started to tell themselves that they are Christian feminists. And they also started to say that public involvement is not just as helpful as it was in the beginning, but they start to say that passivity is wrong. And they also started to preach like social motherhood when women's primary role as a mother extends into public life. For example, they wrote a story about one woman in a village who became police officer, and they praised her because as a mother should protect her children. This woman started to protect her village by being police officer. And so maybe there is a question why this changed after 10 years, and like there may be multiple answers because many things happened. And for example, in 1929, in Slovak politics, there was like a Tuka affair. Just briefly, Wojciech Tuka was a member of the Hlinka Slovak People's Party. And they started to share misinformation about Slovakia's position in Czechoslovakia, because Hlinka Slovak People's Party from the beginnings wanted to have like an autonomous status of Slovakia in Czechoslovakia. And they always were fighting for it. And after 10 years, Wojciech Tuka started to say this misinformation, like there were kind of secret agreement between Slovaks and Czechs that after 10 years, Slovakia can decide if they want to continue in one state, one republic with Czechs. And also he was sentenced to prison for that, also for espionage with Hungarians. And after that, Hlinka Slovak People's Party left the coalition. So in the parliament, there wasn't like a Slovak national and Catholic party, which Catholic unity felt like a threat for Catholic values. And also in the exact time, Moravian Catholic women organization started to preach that women should go back to the families and be just stay-at-home moms and not be publicly active. Actually, this title, In a Fiery Fight, They Flee the Front Line, was about them. And it was like they changed their positions because, in Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia, Catholic Women's Organization had a member named Augusta Racipelová, who was actually a politician. She was a member of the parliament. She voted in the elections in 1920 and 1925, but then she died. And Moravian Catholic women decided to go back to be just stay-at-home mom, and it was exactly the opposite of Catholics when Unity did. Like they were more passive in the beginning, and they started to be more active in the 1930s. And also, they saw it like it will be never-ending crisis because there were always something to fight for, and they thought that their mission will die done once Catholic values will guide Slovakia. And this moment actually came. And it came in 1938 when Slovakia gained autonomous position in Czechoslovakia. And Josef Tiso, who was a priest, became the head of the government because he led Hlinka Slovak People's Party. So he was like a protector of Catholic values for them. And they felt their mission is done and there is nothing to fight for anymore. So what happened? Of course, they continue to publish their magazine, but they focus more on religious content, and they were saying like about how to raise patriotic and national-minded children. They also welcome Slovak state, independent Slovak state, and they wrote, Bernolak, Štur, Hlinka, and Razus would weep with joy if they were among us, if they saw that Slovaks live in their own country, in their own nation, as well as in other nations of the world with religious, cultural, national, and moral self-confidence. What the God-given leader Andrej Hlinka fought for, whose spirit will live forever in the nation, has come true. I would say that Catholics Women Unity was always a very patriotic organization. They were always like the organization of Slovak women. They didn't cooperate with Czech and Moravian Catholic women organizations. They wouldn't like preach that they are apolitical, but still they advised their members to vote for National and Catholic Party, which was the Hlinka Slovak People's Party, but they never specifically say its name. So, and also they changed their view on the feminism again. For example, here when they wrote, individualism and feminism desiring the absolute but pernicious emancipation of women in the family as well do not prepare and educate its generation for the task and difficulties of the marriage union. Thus, the very understanding of the family, and therefore it belittles even the most essential mission of a woman. Today's woman somehow does not want to hear the words of St. Paul, I do not allow a woman to have dominion over a man. And when she does not achieve the very meaning of this prohibition, she tries to achieve at least that neither a man has dominion over her nor in the family. So they started to preach like women should go back to their domestic place, and they should be like mothers and wives. And also this was kind of reactions on other women's movement in Slovakia, because, you know, during the Slovak state, it was like an authoritarian regime, and the government tried to restrict women opportunities in education and employment. And many organizations call out government for it, they try to restrict it, but editors of the Catholic Unity magazines defend the government, and they said it's true that women should go home and be in her primary role as a mothers. So yes, during the Second World War, they focus on religious content and also on social work. They organize entertainment activities like a theater for people, and they also do some social work related to war. They also didn't talk about war, about politics. They just mentioned that, yeah, there is a war and it's bad and we need to pray for peace, but that was it. And of course, they couldn't criticize the regime because it was an authoritarian, but still it was led by the priests. And they couldn't criticize the priest as a religious authority for them. So they sometimes published a picture of soldiers, for example, or here the members of the Catholic Women's Unity preparing packages for soldiers on the front lines. And everything had changed then after the Slovak national uprising, or after the creation of a new Czechoslovak government on 1945, so after the war, because of the government was leading by the priest and he was collaborating with Nazis, many Catholic people, also lay people and priests were seen as a collaborants with Nazis. And also it made like a shadow over the Catholic Church in Slovakia. But still in Slovakia there were like 70% more of Catholics, so they felt really threatened by communism. And also Catholic Church really tried to clear its name. They banned priests from being politicians, and they also inspired Catholic lay people to create the new party without ties on Hlinka Slovak People's Party. And these lay people created the new party called Democratic Party, and they actually won election in 1946. But in Czech Republic, the communists won. And so they had the most power in the country. And, you know, like I said, communists were the main enemies of the Catholics, or for Catholic Church and also for Catholic Unity. They felt very threatened. So also there is the reason why they reached its peak membership in 1948, just before the communist coup. And also during this time, Catholic Women Unity, or editors of Catholic Unity magazine, continued to not write anything about politics. And they didn't even write about the execution of the priest and president Josef Tiso. And they didn't even write anything about its spiritual leader, Eugen Filkon, who was convicted of treason and sentenced to prison. They just introduced a new spiritual leader called Ambros Lasik, another priest, but that was it. So, then after the communist coup, a few months later, on December 1948, the Catholic Women Unity was officially merged with other Slovak women association to form the Union of Slovak Women, Slovenský zväz žien, which was like a communist organization. So it meant that Catholic Women Unity was abolished, and that's the end of the Catholic Women's Unity, and also the end of my presentation. Maybe I just want to add that in my research, I really focus on how the editors of the Catholic Unity magazine try to find balance between the tradition and the modernization of society. How they try to find like the middle ground between those secular feminist ideas which promoted gender equality and the traditional gender roles rooted in Catholic teachings, and also how this changed over time and why they changed their opinions, and how people who preach different gender roles kind of push Catholic women to change their opinions on role of women in family and in society. And also the fact that Catholic Women Unity was the biggest women organization in Slovakia at the time, it shows that many women tried to find like the middle path, and they slowly were accepting some secular feminist ideas, but some of them were too radical for them. And this was also the case of many other countries, for example, in Spain or in Ireland, when in this country where there is a majority of citizen Catholics. And also I focus on how they approach the concept of crisis, because it was different in the beginning when they were created, as they saw the society as in a time of crisis, but they saw the crisis after 10 years, and it was like a never-ending crisis for them. And also, this is just a part of my research, because I also focus on Czech and Moravian Catholic women organization. And and Catholic Women Unity is actually still active today, because the organization was revived in 1990s. But this is just a religion association now. They don't publish any magazine or anything. They just do charity events as a part of the Catholic Church of Slovakia. So I was talking to one of the member of the Catholic Women's Unity in Slovakia, who is like a really old lady, and her mother was also the member of the Catholic Women's Unity during the Second World War, and she also said that like now it's completely different than it was in the interwar period and during the Second World War, and after that, before the communist coup. So yeah, that's it. So thank you for your.
Thank you very much for the very interesting lecture. Now it's time for some questions, if anyone has any immediate ones from the audience. Okay, yeah, Nina, because I know you have to go quickly. That's why
Hi, someone else.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I'm interested in who are the authors in these magazines, and if you can describe more people behind these ideas, who was writing the articles, who are the women?
That's a good question, and the answer is like kind of I don't know, but I know a little about it, because we don't have like an archival documents for the Catholic Unity. We only have their magazines, but they were like the names of the members of the editorial board in the beginning. So I know the names of these women, and I know who was the president and the main editor. Her name was Anna Babikova, and she also got the prize from the Pope in the 1935. And I don't know much about her, as I say, because they don't have any archival documents in Slovak archives. But I know that she was unmarried woman, and she was also, before the Catholic community, she was very active in social work. And also, I know about some of the authors and the member of Catholic Unity. For example, one woman, she also had a university degrees, so she was. She worked in a high school though, she was a traveler. And I know this like a little stuff about some specific members, but I don't know about like the group of women who were in, just their names. So it's such a pity, but it is what it is.
How many pieces was this magazine printed?
I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that in the 1939, in one article they wrote, they published around, I'm not sure, it was around 30,000 of copies, I think, because in every branch and every member have to buy one copy. So, but they were saying like many of the members don't have money for it, so yeah. And it was also, I think, the magazine with who had who print the most copies compared to other magazines.
Thanks.
Isidora, thank you for the presentation. It was really super interesting. And I mean, I'm going to mention maybe some things that we talked about yesterday, but first question relates to what Nina asked now. I'm thinking now, if you don't have archival funds, but you have some names, I'm wondering if some names stand out in relation to others, and whether it's possible to maybe, even if you don't know anything more about their private lives or public even, whether it would be possible to, by reading articles of one woman, make some sort of intellectual biography of like what she wrote about from the 20s to 30s, if it makes sense to think about individual women in this way, or it only makes sense to think of it as a group. This is one question that I had. Then the second, if you could talk a bit more about the relationship between their approach to religion and their approach to national question, and how you see this in the Slovak case.
Okay, so I'll start with the second question. Yeah, it was like, as I said, they were also proud that they are Catholic and also that they are Slovaks. They were very patriotic, and also I think it was more important to them to be like their nationality, because that's the reason why they did not cooperate with Czech and Moravians Women's Association, because Czech and Moravians Women's Association tried to cooperate with them, but they didn't want to. They didn't write anything about what Czechs and Moravian Women's Association were doing, like what were their activities, and they just reacted when they started to preach like they want to be stay-at-home moms. That was the only article about the Moravian Catholic women. But when I was reading magazines from the Catholic and Moravian Women's Association, they mentioned Catholic Unity a lot of time. They read the magazine Catholic Unity. Sometimes they share their articles in their own magazines. So it was like maybe it was like balancing that they are Slovaks and they kind of feel like they're under the Czechoslovakia by them, but they also wanted to have like an autonomous status of Slovakia in Czechoslovakia. And for Czech and Moravians, it was different. They wanted to cooperate because it was like for them, it didn't matter that if they are Slovaks or Czech and Moravian, they are Catholic, so they wanted to cooperate. But it wasn't the case of the Catholic Women team. And to the first question, I would like to have more information about. I know, for example, from one member who wrote a memoir of her life, but she was a very active woman. She was a traveler in the world, and in her memoir, she wrote a lot about how she was traveling to Tunisia and Morocco and Africa, and she doesn't mention Catholic women unity that much. And she was also kind of a famous woman in Slovakia, because even though she was a member of the editorial board, when she wrote an article, there was always her name over the article. That was her article, because most of the articles didn't have the name of the actual author who wrote the article, but her name was there, for example, as the name of the priest or bishop, like the names of the external authors. So yeah, I read the memoirs of her, and also I read memoirs of Eugen Filkorn, and he was writing about the president of the Catholic Unity, Anna Babikova, that she received the prize from Pope for her actions, for her social work, for being president of the Catholic Women's Unity, and that she was very active when she was unmarried woman and stuff like that. But that's also.
Jelena?
Thank you very much. I somehow always I'm fascinated with the Catholic women, and I wish that we could read Was Jesus Christ Socialist or not. But yeah, a couple of questions. First, I was late for maybe 2 minutes, sorry. So what's the state of art in this research? I'm asking also because you mentioned that there's no archives, so what's the state of art in research, and what kind of sources people usually use for doing this, besides the magazines that you now mentioned? And then connected to that, one thing that came to my mind, I don't know if you already did that, but since you said this was the biggest actual women's organization, they were obviously competing both with secular feminist organizations and social democrats and communist women's organizations for women's attention, and they were quite big. So maybe it makes sense also to take a look into magazines of these women's organizations to see what they say about Catholic women, because basically they were the biggest threat in terms of how big they were. And then connected to this, did you find, now you said that they didn't even want to cooperate with Moravian Catholic women, but did you find any slight sign of cooperation of them with other women's organizations in Slovakia? Also with, for example, Social Democrats Women's Organization, because when it comes to the role of mother and housewife in family, many Social Democrats of that time had quite conservative opinions on the role of mother, and I was thinking if they actually ever discussed anything together, met anywhere, or even wanted to meet, or something like that. And finally, connected to who were these women and how to find them. When they were merged with the big women's communist organization, you said that they were merged, they were basically dissolved. But can you maybe follow or try, or did anyone try to follow path of any of these women in communist era? Because strange things happened, and then they could actually maybe have careers afterwards.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in slowly because I had a very similar question than your second one about cooperation with other women's organizations in Slovakia. And then my thought here was that if you look at Yugoslavia, like a big common goal was the vote to right, which was already achieved here in 1918, so before the era which we are talking about. And maybe that in a way hindered, because that right was already there, in a way that maybe hindered the way to cooperate further, because the goals kind of started to diverge a bit more. So that was just my thought on your question, which I was having before.
Okay, so thank you for the questions. So they did not cooperate with Social Democrat Women Association. You know, like there weren't like lots of women association in Slovakia at the time. There was like an organization of communist women. They also had their own magazines, and yes, I read it. I will get to it later. And also there was like organization, very big organization of women called Živena, which was actually created in the 19th century. And also they did not cooperate with them, and they didn't even mention them, because they felt like they are the organization of Catholic women under the Catholic Church, and like they are good on their own. They don't need to cooperate. They do like their own activities, they publish their own magazine, like for example the other organizations, for example Communist Women, they did not cooperate with Živena actually. And Also, I would say there were more cooperation between the communist organization in Slovakia, communist organization women, and also with communist organization on women in Czech Republic. And also this was the case of the Živena, because the organization of Živena was cooperating with Alica Masaryková, who was the daughter of the president Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk. And so that's why that they did not cooperate. And even though they had, I would say, lots of common, because when I was reading the magazine of the communists, what they published, and the Communist Catholic Women Unity, they weren't so different. It was still like the interview period. Like, also communists weren't that radical as they said, like as Catholic women said. So and to the sources, I just use their magazine, Catholic Unity magazine, and The New Woman. They started to publish it in the end of the year 1937, but they published it just for a few years. So I use these magazines, and they are my main source. And because I don't have anything, and also it's the case of the Catholic women organization in Czech and Morava. For example, one historian called Jana Burešová, she was writing about these Czech Catholic women organizations, and she also used.
What was her first name?
Jana.
Yeah,
Jana
I have
Burešová.
another Burešová, so I was.
Okay. So yes, she also used just their magazines as a source.
Okay, so then we have a question from Zoom, from Marcin Wilk, and I apologize to anyone who knows Polish or is listening from Polish, because I will slaughter what I will try to pronounce right now. Thank you for the very interesting lecture. In Poland, where the Catholics were in the interwar very strong, it looked very similar with Polish katolički. Now the struggle begins. Yes.
We understand, okay.
Thank you. Kobiet, I have a specific question, maybe on the margin of your lecture, but maybe you know that. I was wondering how, if so at all, did the Great Depression have the influence of imagination of women's role in society among the organization's discourse?
Yes, so during the Great Depressions, they were writing more about how they need to do social work, because they also, for their whole existence, they did some social work and they tried to help people. This was also the case during the Second World War. They were very active. I would say they were like a social group of women, not just publishing their magazine and teaching, but also they wanted to be active in Slovakia. Every branch was very active in their hometowns, and yes, so.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions from the public? Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. I also wasn't here from the first minute. Maybe you already explained it, but why nova žena? Why new woman? Why it's especially related to Catholicism?
That was always my question. And as I said, because I don't have like an archive documents, I don't even know why they created new magazine. And I just know that probably, but I don't have like any evidence for it. Probably it was like the younger generation of the Catholic Women Unity, because we can see lots of new names in the editorial board of this magazine, New Woman. And also, after the war and during the 1920s and 1930s, they were talking about the new women who want to be active in society. And as I said in the beginning, they weren't that much active, and this changed. So probably, maybe they wanted to write a new magazine. But when I was reading the magazine, The New Woman, Nova žena, it was very similar to Catholic Unity magazine. Like they wrote about similar topics like motherhood or about religion, politics. Maybe they wrote more about fashion, I would say, and they published more pictures, because Catholic Unity was more like an educational magazine, and The New Woman magazine was maybe more about pictures, recipes, fashion and stuff like that. So, but I don't know exactly the reason, and I was always interested in it. Why they started a new magazine? And maybe because they had their own publishing company, they didn't have it like from the beginning. I mean, it was in the late 1920s when they started to have their own publishing company and to also print more religious books and religious literature and stuff like that. So they have like money and stuff for that.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment for there were questions about your archival sources. We talked about it a lot, that many archival sources actually in Slovakia are still it's like hidden or not available by Catholic Church. For example, in Nitra there must be a lot of documents there and archival
but
sources.
Also maybe it was just a women association. They didn't need to have like archives. They didn't need to archive their own documents as an organization. So maybe that's the reason why I can't find something in regional or the national archive.
Hello.
Thank you for your very interesting lecture. I have a very brief question. Was there any relation of any kind with the Catholic action? It must have been a Catholic action for sure in Slovakia, because it was active pretty much everywhere in the Catholic world. So what was the relation?
I would say that they were part of the Catholic action, because I would say they were part of the Catholic action in Slovakia. Yeah, because when Eugen Filkon inspired them to create it, they also I think they wrote it in like the one of the first issues they published, that they are the part of the Catholic action, because Catholic action is about Catholic lay people to be active in society and to help Catholic Church with their goals, and this was also the goal of the Catholic community. So I would say they were part of the Catholic action in Slovakia.
So maybe there you can find some data, some archival materials somewhere, I don't know, in relation with Catholic action, I don't know. What you have left of Slovak Catholic action in the archive.
Yeah.
Then it could be there.
Yeah, thank you for suggestion. I would try. And as I said, there is also like an archive of the Catholic Church in Slovakia, but nobody has access to it, just Catholic Church. So maybe that's a problem. You know, it's tough because they also had documents of the Catholic Church during the Second World War, when some priests were collaborating with Nazis, so it can be problematic. So maybe that's the reason why Catholic Church in Slovakia don't want anyone to have access to their archive.
So excuse me, so the state probably sent back this archive after 1990 or what to the church? Because I'm sure it was confiscated.
The church has their own archives.
Yes, I know that.
And there is no like the archive documents for Catholic action in the national archives or for religious communities or something related to Catholic Church. It's all in their own archive.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting idea, but
Okay, I will finish.
only Lev just said that maybe it's the question of the intelligence service, the internal intelligence, the secret police
What are they doing?
could have more than you would imagine. But I imagine that those archives are also quite hard to get to.
Yeah, of course.
Any more questions, comments? If not, I would like to thank everyone in the audience for the discussion and on Zoom, of course, but also invite you to our next lecture, which is in 2 weeks. I am very happy that we will host our colleague from the Institute of Contemporary History in Belgrade, Ljubinka Škodrić, and to kind of round up the 8th of March, we will speak about women in Serbia during the Second World War on the 12th of March. Thank you.
Thank you.